renegade thinkers. In my prep call with every potential guest, I give myself 30 minutes to find the storyline, an exercise that is both thrilling and challenging. After 239 episodes, I can't be sure if I'll find a new story or at least a new angle into a story that you haven't already heard before. But that's my goal. Because if we tell a good story together, you're more likely to find some insight-rich nuggets, some morals to the story that you can apply to your business challenges. Now, to share a little inside baseball, there are really only 4 plots that I typically follow. 4 that were outlined in a book called, and it's a real good book, Story Selling by Nick Nanton and J.W. Diggs. And these 4 plots are: 1, overcoming the monster. Think pandemic pivots like episode 225 with Danusha Savagey of The Knot. Number 2, rags to riches. That's startup success stories like episode 229 with Ran Avrahami of Apps Flyer. Number 3, the quest. Here we focus on outcomes and obstacles like episode 218 with Kevin Sellers of Ping Identity. And then 4th, rebirth. Here we're talking mainly about a rebrand like episode 217 with Kevin Ruane of Precisely. So when I spoke with today's guest, imagine my glee when he described his journey as a story with 3 acts. That's right, a story with 3 acts, which we will now explore for your listening or viewing if you're joining us on YouTube. Pleasure. Raise the curtain and please welcome the star of today's story, Paul Stoddart, the CMO of Epicor. Hey, Paul.
Drew, thanks for having me.
How's it going?
It's going great.
Good. Now, where are you, by the way?
I'm actually in Austin, Texas.
Ah, yes, the cool part of Texas.
Oh, they're your words. I appreciate them. I agree.
And are things picking up in Austin? I mean, are you seeing a lot more? I mean, first of all, can you go to hear music?
I'm not sure it's quite that open yet. I would say it's more open than other places. And I spent half my time in Seattle. And I'd say Austin is definitely, a little bit more out there than the Seattle crew for sure.
Yeah. No, that would make sense. All right. So let's set the stage here. Is there a prologue required before we jump into Act 1? I mean, like, what's Epicor?
What is Epicore? Great question. So Epicor is a 50-year-old organization, effectively is an ERP organization, predominantly focused on the mid-market. And, I would say was, for a long time considered the gold standard of ERP. And most recently, we would describe it as one of the world's best kept secrets. And that's the journey we've been on to, recapture, if you like, some of the fame of who we are.
Now, typically for a marketer to say best kept secret is not necessarily a good thing, right? Because that's kind of our job, is to make sure that our customers, our clients, our companies are not secret. So, all right, it's March 2020. This is Act 1, I believe. Give us the situation.
Well, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I joined. I guess that's it. I've been with Epicor a year now. So you're absolutely right. Back at March 2020, I joined on April the 1st. There's some, noticeable dates right there on April the 1st. I joined Epicor. And the reality, that was understanding, this best kept secret. What is it and why is it not more prevalent out there? Why do people not, truly understand who this is? Because the customers do. The people who actually work with Epicor, know Epicor, love Epicor, been with Epicor for, almost generations. But, it's like, but why isn't that secret being shared, more broadly with people? That was Act 1. It was like seek to understand.
And so let's talk about that. Let's get into some of the things that you did or you and your team did to really get a handle on what the brand is and it stands for. And
yeah. Like any brand refresh in many ways, and I joined not really aiming on going through a brand refresh. At the end of the day, what I came to was how do you uplift marketing? My hypothesis coming in many ways was a case of there's probably a generational shift that needs to happen from technology and capability, and partly that was true. But the reality was we soon realized that the brand, as you were speaking with people, just didn't match who we were internally or what our customers were saying about us. So it became really obvious pretty quickly that there was a piece of brand work that had to go on board. And therefore you go through the process. You know the process as well as I do. Brand strategy follows business strategy. So let's make sure we're all clear on what the business strategy is. We're lucky. We've got a really strong CEO, very strong leadership team. The 5-year strategy was clear, but I would say the brand strategy didn't actually match it. So that was kind of like first flag number one, was hey, there's a gap, if you like, here of where we're pointing and what we're doing as an organization versus what is required for the company to be where they want to be in 5 years' time. So that's the standard process: going in, digging that, understanding internally and externally, and then laying out what is the brand strategy to match that business strategy. So that's pretty
I'm going
standard.
to go in a little bit because everybody does this slightly differently. When we talk about a gap between the brand and the business, can you talk about what kinds of things, what did that gap look like?
Yeah. For us, I think that there's a desire and an appetite from a business perspective for us to grow our international markets. We're a global organization. We're in 140 countries, but the reality is the majority of our business is in America. And there was hey, we need to grow the international business. We want to be, serving these countries better than we are today. But I would say the brand strategy, even the marketing strategy, really, wasn't aligned to that. It was, overly weighted towards Americas. So you're never going to affect your business strategy if you don't have your teams aligned to the right problem.
Right. So that's one, and that's just that's a combination of reassigning resources. But I'm also imagining that once you say this is not just about the US, it's about international, it also sort of changes how you have to think about the brand. And am I making that up? I mean,
no, you're absolutely right. I think the brand before, over a period of time, Epicor as an organization has grown through acquisition. So there's a little bit of dilution there as well as organizations come on board. You do a little bit of, give and take here and there. And the reality is maybe it was a little bit more diluted than need to be. It wasn't really clear that, we're very clear on who we serve. We serve 5 industries, and we serve 5 industries incredibly deeply. But that wasn't necessarily as clear as it could be, even internally for the organization to know. It's like it's clear cut. We're not going to be going into other industries that we can't serve to the quality that we expect to. We have a promise that we deliver to our customers. And if we can't deliver against that, we're not going to do it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The brand strategy, there's things that you have to lean in there and actually, maybe cut away some things and say, hey, this is an area which isn't a focus for us and shouldn't be a focus for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was going to hone in on that a little bit with who you serve. I mean, the fact that you've said we only serve these 5 industries, that alone is a liberating. It gives you a chance to focus. But you rarely, and so that vertical strategy obviously helps. But what else did you need to sort of discover in order to sort of help you move along this line of, okay, we're sort of a US based brand that does serve the global market. So we've got geography and we've got verticals, but what were sort of some of the other things that you needed to sort of identify to help get you to a new marketing strategy?
It's a case of actually rediscovering who we were. I would say a big part of it was getting that singularity focus on what we really are versus what we're not. And most organizations, you think you know who you are. You spend a lot of time looking at your competitors. You spend a lot of time with your customers. So you think about what a customer needs, and you're always trying to deliver to that. You're looking at your competitors and going, wow, they're doing some really interesting things over there, and maybe we should talk about that a little bit. But you can lose your own way on talking about what makes you great. What is your secret sauce? So, I mean, candidly, Drew, for us, it was about the rediscovery of who we really are and what makes us special. And it was an amazingly impactful journey to do so, because when you actually replay back to the organization, this is what others say about us. External market, our customers, and actually ourselves. When you actually condense that and replay it back, you kind of get that palpable, shiverable moment where you're like, wow, yeah, that is us. That's really incredible. And I remember one of the phrases we heard were, you're our essential partner and we're essential businesses. And you have to remember, my first year at Epicor was actually going through COVID. So it's like, essential businesses was like a really impactful statement for someone to say at that moment in time. So to say we were their essential partner is like, hey, you got to stop and think for a moment here. It's like, don't try and be anything else. Lean in on what you are. So a lot of it comes down to then, what are your brand, what are your brand values? What's your narrative? Let's make sure that narrative is really clear, and let's lean in on who we are. So it's the rewriting of the architecture, if you like, updating it. But a lot of it was already there. 80% of it was there. It's about refreshing it and making it clear again.
Yeah, boy, that would have been a tremendous, because what happened, and I've talked about this on the show before, I mean, particularly April, May, June, the introduction of this character I called the CF No, who basically said, I'm sorry, unless you really are essential, as in keep our business operational, we don't want to talk to you now. And so a lot of companies were sort of frozen out and scrambled to try to figure out how they could become essential, how they could show, and it became how speed of return. So could you lower my costs quickly? Then I might consider it. But you were already at an essential place. So yeah, I could see how that would be reassuring. When we talk about the milestones, first of all, did you do all this work in-house?
We worked with an external company agency together, design based out of the UK, that helped us sort through the brand work. So doing the brand strategy with us, incredible set of partners, and then our internal team here. So very small, small dedicated team, but recognize that brand for me is internally focused and externally felt. I think everyone at Epicore would say they've heard me say that numerous times. So this wasn't about being done to, this was about us owning, our own destiny and understanding who we are again.
And so let's talk about the internal part of this, because I love that expression. I'm going to ask you to say it again. Externally what? And internally felt?
Brand
externally,
is internally focused and externally felt.
I see. And so what does that mean? I mean, how do you sort of bring that to life? What's that?
Well, I think the reality is that anyone can tell a story. Ty Montague wrote a book. You referenced a book at the beginning of the call. Ty Montague wrote a book around story doing versus storytelling. And I think the reality is anyone can tell a story, and you go and say, look, this is our brand, here's the veneer. But under the covers, it's like, does undercovers really match what you really say? And that's why I say, so brand needs to be internally focused. Anything you do inside will be amplified exponentially outside, the good and the bad. And for me as a CMO, I recognize that the reality is the brand experience that I have goes way beyond the brand team and the marketing team. The reality is, our procurement department have got as much impact on our brand as, in many ways I do, because if you want to buy, from Epicore, is it a seamless and easy experience, or is it, a terrible, tragic, horrible one? So therefore, you have to look broadly internally and say, okay, are we delivering on, this experience we want to give to people? Then it will be externally felt correctly.
And so as you're going through this process, were you, as the marketer, making a list of sort of, I'm going to just call them experience fixes that needed to be sort of addressed before you could sort of go to market with a new promise?
I guess you could say yes. I think the reality, again, most people within the organization knew what the challenges were. What it gave us the ability to do was, if you like, ratify why we should be focusing on them now. Because if we want to actually, truly refresh our brand and, say to the market, look, this is who we are, we've, refreshed it so it's easier to understand, then we have to be able to deliver to that. So things that maybe were on the back burner, all of a sudden became, something which, had to become a priority. But to your point, back on the, the CFNO, the whole COVID dilemma, it's like things that were on the back burner all of a sudden became a priority for our customers and for us. So, that gave us a great chance to look at, how do we deliver on our promise of, a simplified experience, a better experience.
All right. Well, all of this is music to my ears because, everything in my next book talks all about how, the internal audience is the critical audience in this process, both from an understanding, but then as a communication, but as you described it, as an action. It's so much of what we think about with brand is about what you do, not what you say. All right. Speaking of that, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into, so what did you say? What did you do? So, all right, we'll be right back. I'd like to take a second to plug CMO Huddles. We launched in 2020. CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs, all B2B, to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment. Another CMO called them the cross between an executive workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share and care with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com and let's talk. Okay, we're back. And now we're ready to talk about Act 2. How, and what we didn't really talk about is where you ended up at the, part of Act 1, I'm imagining, is you got to come up with a summation of the new brand and sort of a plan. But how did you end up summarizing the new brand?
Yeah, for us, it went a little bit beyond the brand, because for us, it was actually a moment in time to actually step change the whole of the marketing organization, to recognize that actually B2B has changed, as a whole entity. Again, I would say, COVID for us drove the fact that, traditional mechanisms where we may engage with customers no longer are on the table for us. Heavily, event driven, maybe trade shows, webinars, those sorts of things. Very quickly, people had webinar fatigue and couldn't go to events. So again, projects which were on maybe the back burner, or were tactically things people were experimenting with, became priority number one for us. We had to have a completely different capability to be able to deliver for customers. So it went beyond brand, to be honest with you, Drew. It was okay. The brand allowed us to be very clear on what we had to deliver. We had to really clearly deliver on our promise. We make for you, with you. So it's like, if we make with our customers for our customers, how do we actually now deliver that? And from a marketing team perspective, what capabilities, what processes do we need to now be able to deliver against that? Because they're different. They're very different a year on than they were a year ago. Like I say, both market dynamic wise, and because for our organization, we just needed to up our game a bit. So that was the big, if you like, transformation drive we've been on, is recognizing what are the skills, the capabilities, the processes, the technologies you need in place for a marketer of today and the next 5 years versus yesterday and the prior 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it really was every department in every company had to regroup, because 40-50% of so many B2B organizations depended on physical events for leads. Yeah. And not just leads, but helping to close sales. So it was, you take that off the table. And it's funny, because a lot of folks did see success with virtual events in a short period of time. But then even that became a difficult thing. I want to make sure did I hear a tagline like "we make with you for you"? Was that, or is that internal language? I just want to make sure I got that.
It's our promise. Honestly, when I look at a brand framework, everyone tends to go, hey, let's look at our narrative, our vision, our mission. Normally your values are in there as an organization. You might be looking at your identity and your tone and all of those sorts of things. They're all in a standard brand framework. Quite often what gets overlooked, from my perspective, is the promise to the customer, because everything else is internally focused. As it should be. It's like, hey, we want to make sure that we represent ourselves correctly, but that doesn't say to the customer what they should expect from us. So therefore, for us, our promise was really important. And that really is that we make with our customers for our customers. And that transpires into everything we do, how we do our product development, through to, how do we actually, on a day-to-day operate.
And was there a promise in place beforehand, before this?
No, we were probably more rallied around, and still are, around our mission. So that's really important. That's a great guiding light and North Star for the organization internally to rally around. But I say that was maybe being communicated a little bit too much externally and didn't make sense to our customers. It's kind of, that feels like much more about you than it is about me. And the reality is, what we heard loud and clear from every one of our customers was, if you work with this organization, if you work with Epicor, you're in a partnership, you're in a real relationship. So it's like, so we don't need to be exposing what, our 5-year mission is. Actually, what we need to be explaining is, what does that partnership mean? And what are we, what can you hold us accountable to? And that's the promise.
So how do you make that? What were some of the things that you needed to do to make that promise real?
Oh, that's a great question. It depended on different parts of the marketing organization. So in product marketing, in many ways, it was a case of, do we have the right customer advisory boards in place? Are we actually speaking with customers and getting their input? Are we sharing early? Are we willing to take feedback? Are we, transparently sharing that in the organization over to the product development team? Are we researching things that customers are saying, hey, we think we would like, these things in the future? Are we investing in things that they want versus the, we following the shiny object internally? And that's terribly easy to do, especially with, technology today. All of a sudden, you want to follow AI and AR and VR and blah, blah, blah. It's like, maybe that's exciting, but that might not be what your customer wants. So product marketing wise, that's one example. But also through to, we've got really strong and loyal advocates. So our PR team, for instance, was like, okay, are we engaging with the right people at the right moments? There are people who want to tell the story. So, let's make sure we're working with them so that, they can have their moment of fame as well, because there are people out there, like I say, they're essential businesses. They are doing, they are the ones that are keeping the economy running. It's pretty spectacular when you speak with them.
Interesting. Okay, so we have the product marketing, obviously, getting that customer advisory board together is so important. And really, it is an initial test of brand strength that customers actually, and their importance to your business, to them. If they want to be part of it, then it really matters to them. If they don't, they go, yeah. And then advocacy is another interesting thing, because gets very tricky when you're talking about something like an ERP, which I would imagine is part of the core of a business. And is that something you want to share publicly? So imagine you might run into that. So finding folks that will talk about it publicly makes a lot of sense. Were there other areas from an employee standpoint that sort of generated a sense of pride that they're working at a place that mattered?
Yeah, I think so. I think ultimately that work to truly understand who we were again, Drew, where, you can unashamedly say, look, it's okay to be proud of this. We don't have to, always be comparing ourselves to others. It's okay to actually say, the bar is high and we're setting it. And our customers are saying, that this is actually what is really important to them. I think it's easy to get lost on, what you read and what you see elsewhere. So, candidly, internally, it's been a pretty exciting time for us. And not to say that not everybody's been on the journey. There's a few people who are kind of like, this is almost too good to be true, and can't quite get there. But the majority of people are like, wow, it's it was here all the time. It just needed to be unleashed a little bit.
Yeah. And the folks that can't get with the program, well, that's okay too, because that's sort of, it's like having a target audience that you're going to say no, we're going to say no to. So it becomes a filter for, I would think, employee success or non-success. Let's get specific here in terms of, I'm thinking about, this is a really interesting customer-centric approach. You're putting all your eggs in your sort of, we're really thinking about our customers sort of every second of the day, and embedded, if you will, as partners. How it is a large promise. How does, what other things did you, from a marketing standpoint, could you do or did do to, again, make this real?
Yeah, there isn't a silver bullet, Drew, of hey, we turned on, account-based marketing, or, hey, intent-based data did, yada, yada, yada. It's like, it's not that. There's a million things from a process technology perspective. I think it's culturally that actually was the biggest, dynamic change, and it's going to take the longest to, really proliferate, if you like, throughout the whole of the organization. But it is what's made the change here. We were really clear up front. Myself and my leadership team were like, let's get really clear on some principles that we want people to operate by. There were some things that were holding us back. We very much as an organization were, in service to other parts of the organization. Oh, if making it up, but if sales want that, then we should go deliver it, versus let's actually be proactive and, actually really delve into understanding our customer journey, understanding their needs and presenting back to the organization as marketeers of, hey, this is where we need to be going and here's how we're going to deliver against it. We need to culturally, be willing to be learners, not knowers, is another thing, right? It's it sounds like a bit of a strange one, but you're always looking for discipline expertise, don't get me wrong, but the reality is nobody knows more than anybody knows. So make your data transparent to everyone in the organization and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing and how I'm interpreting it. Here's my plan. But if anyone spots anything else, let's have a conversation. And we've seen quite a dramatic change in the organization of, a culture of maybe approvals and yes, no conversations to ones which are, incredibly collaborative, and exploring ideas and looking for, what are tenets for success, and let's put something into market quick, test it, fail fast is fine, failure is fine, as long as you're not damaging your customer. I mean, obviously, but it was like cultural change has been the big aha.
And you said a couple of things that I just want to sort of put a punctuation point on, that I think is so interesting is just this, it required cultural change in order for this thing to be real and be forward looking. And a lot of folks, this is one transformation that seems to happen. Marketing has sort of evolved when it's no longer an order taking department for sales, right? It's something that's actually driving not just message, but sort of the whole go-to-market play in partnership with sales. So that's sort of a moment in time that marketing department maturity. One of the things that also seems to hold these transformations back is that comp doesn't change. And if we're rewarded for exactly the same behavior before brand change, did anything change in that front?
Ooh, that's an interestingly tricky one. Not necessarily from a marketing perspective. I think, again, if we went back to your brand strategy follows your business strategy and we got clarity over our business strategy, it became clear that maybe our compensation for some of our salespeople actually wasn't completely aligned to our 5-year strategy. So, we're very much a cloud-based organization, but we weren't necessarily compensating people as well as we should be on driving that activity. So there were definitely some changes in that regard of, hey, compensate for the behavior you want to see. From a marketing perspective, I think it was slightly different. I think, like a lot of organizations, we measure, hey, there's excellence, you've achieved your targets for the year, and then there's needs improvement, like standard kind of like review type thing. I would just say that it was a little bit off kilter. So I would say the marketing organization felt like, the standard you should expect at the end of the year is you exceeded, you were excellent in your review. And the reality is the majority of organizations should have achieved their targets for the year. So it's like, maybe our goals aren't actually aspirational enough. So Drew, that was actually a really interesting point, which is, raising the bar within the organization, saying, hey, we're going to raise the bar. We want to do better work. But by the way, that means your review is probably going to look like you've done less well, but actually that's better. There's been very few people that in that rarefied air of 1%. Not everybody can be there. So that's been a little bit of a change as well. But I think all for the better. Yeah,
I mean, I guess in how you are evaluated is as much a part of this as how you're paid. And often when you are looking for cultural transformation, you definitely have to get into that eval form, because otherwise people are just going to keep doing business the way they've been doing business. And you're talking about a transformation that's pretty significant, and one that I think you got to get everybody on board with. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into Act 3. Okay, we're back. So let's see. We've aligned the brand strategy with the business strategy. We've done a lot of work, both with building out some of this customer experience. We've done a lot of work with employees, changing evaluations. Sort of, what's Act 3?
Yeah, Act 3 is a little bit of an ambiguous one, but importantly so, because I genuinely believe that the end point, the destination, if you like, should never be reached. I get accused by some of my team of, you're always laying tracks down, faster in front of us, and we can get to where we're going. It's like, yeah, that's kind of my job. So Act 3 is a little bit like that, Drew. So I say to people, Act 3 is yet to come. We're actually probably never going to get out of Act 2. Because Act 3 is about, the business is going to change. It just is. In the next 12 to 18 months, the market's going to change, the business could change. We would have been way closer to our 5-year aspirational goal as a business. And we're going to need to pivot as a marketing organization as well. So Act 3 is really about preparing to be spontaneous. I think you've got to prepare to be spontaneous. And that means everything we're doing right now, if we're creating tools or processes that are rigid and don't allow for flexibility and allow us to grow and allow us to change, if we create a mindset of being knowers and not learners, then we're never going to be able to, be, if you like, able to deliver for Act 3. I'm not sure we'll ever get to Act 3, but the reality is it's there as the, hey, we've always got to be prepared for it. So a little bit ambiguous, but strategically so.
So, and I'm thinking of a survey that there's so many this last year. Ironically, people in service industries and white collar jobs working more hours, even though they don't have their commute, but they're working more hours. And there's a sense of work never stops. This work-life home thing and I wonder how in that framework you sort of find, if there is no Act 3 and we're just always going, how do you sort of stop and sort of say, hey, we did something. we have places to go. But is there a moment in time where your team gets, great job, guys, and here's what we've accomplished? How do you celebrate success in this sort of, you're never there yet?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great call out, something to be super aware of. I'm really aware that I'll be hey, attaboy, well done, and I've moved on. And the reality is the organization needs a little bit more love. Candidly, I know that's an area that I have to keep revisiting. So thank you for the reminder again.
Sorry.
But the reality, it's about setting great milestones. It's about setting great expectations. It's about delivering against them. And it's about celebrating those successes and actually sharing the work you've done and sharing it unashamedly, and getting the recognition deserved for that work. And I'm lucky. I got a good leadership team that recognizes hey, we've got people that are doing incredible work. And when we hit those milestones, they do make sure that people get the recognition. My point, I think as a CMO, my job is to be hey, the bar's just got to keep improving. If someone leaves the organization, I'm not looking to replace the person. I'm looking to get someone better, to actually take it to the next level. If we've achieved something with a piece of technology, it's that's fantastic. It's let's make sure that we know what's next. And it might be doing more with this, it might be rationalizing, it might be simplification, but it's let's not rest on laurels.
Got it. So one of the challenges that folks that are if they're saying and they recognize this situation, they go, oh God, I do have a brand problem. There's a disconnect. And, but I got to keep the business running and I've got demand gen. I got to fill the pipeline with X% of leads. What did you do because the brand part takes time. I'm going to ask just sort of how long did it take you from, okay, we're going to tackle brand to we're going to rebrand?
We probably did it in an accelerated fashion, Drew. So the reality is, the strategy work of it was a good 6 months. Right. And I would say normally it takes people a good year. I'm very lucky, our partner Together Design are brilliant. And they, we were very aligned on what we needed to do, how we needed to do it. I also had a executive leadership team that were ready. They knew it needed to be done. So I think normally people have to take, the organization on that journey to get them prepared for, we need to do this. I was lucky. I walked into that. They were probably more ready for it than I was.
Right. Yeah, and it makes sense. And that's key. I mean, if I were to put a list together of what you need to have in place in order to make to fast track a rebrand, executive committee is 1, 2, and 3. They've got to be on board and willing to participate. And then that's part of it. So while you were doing this, you're redoing that. Was there still pressure or things that you had to do? Because after all, we were in a pandemic, and the way that marketing used to generate leads had to change. How did you balance this rebrand work with we still need leads in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. That is absolutely, you had to fly a plane and rebuild a plane. The reality is we have a lot of good mechanisms and a lot of good engines and people and teams. So this isn't a throw the baby out with the bathwater situation. There's lots and lots of good. Like I say, it was more of in some cases, realigning what we were doing and making sure that dots were connected and teams were connected to the right goals with each other. And then there's the inevitable. It's like our events team were kind of like, hey, we have to pivot. We're not going to be in person running big events. We need to very quickly learn and adopt and address virtual capabilities. That's why I love the team. They are learners. They're like, hey, we're gonna go and we're gonna understand this. We're gonna see who else is doing it, what works well, what doesn't. And we're going to find other avenues to keep the business being driven forward. So for us, it was a parallel exercise. The things don't stop because you're re-looking at your brand. Like I say, we were refreshing our brand and really rewriting our narrative so that it made sense internally to match actually what people were saying externally. So once you had that, all of a sudden actually things aligned really quickly.
So I want to make sure that I understand. So 6 months from we're going to do this to we have it.
Yep.
How much time did you allow for internal sort of indoctrination? Sometimes I've talked to CMOs who actually had sort of certified training programs that people had to go through to sort of pass to prove that they actually knew what the new brand was about. But how much time did you spend on the internal, we'll call it indoctrination?
Yeah, it's ongoing, Drew. It's absolutely ongoing. So going back to the internally focused, externally felt, we brought the organization on the journey with us. This wasn't something we did to them. So the reality is, as we went through all of the exploratory exercise, and then we're thinking about architecture and naming and simplification, it's like, the business did that with us, from engineering through to the sales team. It's like, be part of it. Ultimately, if we do it to you, people are going to push back. If they're part of it, they understand the rationale why you've done it. So the reality is, at the point of, okay, we're ready to bring this to our customers, make this live, I would actually say the internal organization was more ready than we technically were able to deliver. We have to refresh a website with however many tens of thousands of documents and pages, et cetera. Our internal teams were like literally biting at the bit to be speaking with customers. We need you to hold back. It's like, let's get everything ready first. So I think testament to bringing the company along and being internally focused, that accelerates the ability to deliver.
Yeah, no doubt. You just have to bring them along, because that's what, I mean, ultimately that is, the company is the people. And if they're not buying in and they aren't part of the process, it just crumbles. And that's the part that's hard that you simply can't shortcut. Okay, so if we have a bunch of CMOs listening and they're going, oh God, maybe I'm ready now to do this rebrand. Give us 2 do's and a don't.
Do's and a don't. Okay, well, the first, you're absolutely right. The first is, do have the open conversation with the, your peers in the ELT of what it really is going to mean. The reality, if you are going to do a refresh and a rebrand, you should want to do it because you think there needs to be change, not because you're trying to, prove what you're doing is right today. So, like I say, for us, it was a case of there was an appetite and people recognized the need. And I don't think we could have done it, certainly in the timeline we wanted, without people wanting to lean and make it happen. So you got to have that buy-in. That's got to be number one. Number two, I think reality is like really focus on the narrative. It's easy to fill out a brand framework and put words and, cross them off the list and make people happy, implicate people here, there. But the reality is, if you write a narrative which is true and correct, everybody internally in the organization should be able to read it and say, oh, that's me, that's us. And everybody externally should be able to read it, your customers should be able to read it and say, oh, that's them. And your prospects should be able to read and say, they're the people I want to work with. So the narrative for me is actually the crux of everything in many ways. If you get that right, and you've got that triad of people who are like, okay, this is the thing, everything goes from there. It's pretty exciting.
And a don't?
Don't ignore the promise. I think it's easily overlooked. People spend time on it. Should you have a vision and a mission, and we've got values and blah blah. But all of those things are internally focused. And I think the thing that we love about great brands, I think you can look at, name any of the consumer brands, you can pretty much, articulate what they're committing to do with you. So as a B2B brand, what is your promise to your customer? And are you willing to actually say it out loud and be held accountable to it? That's a big one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's awesome. All right. Well, this was a really interesting and instructive story. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
To all the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, hey, do me a favor, go write a 5-star review and tell the story about what you listened to. Okay. Renegade Thinkers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Audio production is by Sam Beck. Show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about quite possibly the best B2B marketing agency in New York City, visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.